Dear students, I welcome you all for my today's lecture, which is an important topic of plant systematics, that is the types of plant classification systems. First of all, let's have a look on the definition of classification. Classification is an arrangement of all the organisms into groups on the basis of their similarities. The grouping is done from a less inclusive to a more inclusive group until the total organisms are assembled into a final more inclusive group. The sequence of classification it follows a fixed system of hierarchy of categories which was first established by Linnaeus. For example, genus, family, order, etc. The classification process includes assigning appropriate position and rank to a new taxon. Here, as you can see, the hierarchical system which has been established. It starts with species, then genus, family, order, class, phylum, kingdom, and domain. The species is the least inclusive group among these categories, and the domain it forms the most inclusive group. Now the question arises, what is the need for classification? As we are all aware about the importance of plants, their sources, they act as a source for the food, fodder, etc. Besides, it has been estimated that the total number of plant species which exist on the planet Earth are more than 4,22,000. Among these plant species, according to IUCN report of 2020, almost 17,507 plant species are facing threat. Besides, 75% of world population it relies on the traditional medicine, where the plants act as an important source for these medicines. So there's a need to study all the plants for various purposes. Number one, to know about the ecosystem. Number second, the conservation of the plant biodiversity. Number third, the proper management of these plants. And the number four, scientific study of the plants. Now coming to the main point, that is the types of classifications in taxonomic system. On various bases, there are the classification systems have been categorized into three main systems. Number one is artificial system, number second natural system, and number third is phylogenetic system. Now coming to artificial system of classification. This system of classification is one of the oldest and is the first approach of classification of plants. This system of classification is utilitarian and is based on some easily observable characters. For example, habitat, phenology, number of plant parts, floral characters, etc. Although it is very easy system of classification, but it cannot describe and classify all plants correctly since it involves only a few characters. The artificial system of classification has been followed in various books and by various scholars, including Vedas, Theophrastus, Scandus, Magnus, Brunfels, Linnaeus, etc. So here are some examples of the artificial systems of classification and the parameters on which they were based on. Here I would like to discuss about the linear system of classification, which was based on the sexual behavior of plants, the number, length, and the union of stems and carpels. This is this outline of the Linnaeus' sexual system of classification. Linnaeus categorizes plants into 24 classes based on the number of stamens. For example, those plants which have only one stamen, they were grouped in monandria, with two stamens in diandria, with three stamens in triandria, and so on and so forth. Now, what are the advantages of artificial system of classification? The artificial system of classification is very easy and simple. It is less time consuming, and we can classify the plants with little information of only one or two characters. Poorly known plants can easily be classified under this system. And number four, there is less need of instruments of classification. And number four, last is it is very specific to the character of choice. classification has also some disadvantages. For example, it is not universally applicable. Number second is it cannot initiate bold prediction. Third is since the choice of characters are arbitrary, the exact correlation with existence between different groups cannot be established. Number four, various unrelated taxa, which are not related at all but similar in only one respect, have been classified under the same class in this classification. And number four, it cannot establish evolutionary relationships among taxa, which is found in phylogenetic classification. Now coming to second classification, that is natural system of classification. This system of classification was introduced by Jean Vine in 1623. This system of classification it is based on the natural affinities of plants. It is done based on natural characteristics of plants. This system of classification it places together organisms that have greater number of shared characters. And number four, not only a single feature is important, but the sum total of all the features which are exhibited by the plants are the main tools of classification. So the classification of plants which is done based on the maximum natural characteristics of plants and not a single characteristic but total characteristics acts as the key to place a plant into a definite taxa is termed as natural system of classification. This system of classification was followed by different plant taxonomists, including Bahin, Ray, Adamson, Ducey, Robert Brown, Kendall, Alphonse, and Bentham and Hooker classification. So the parameters which some of the taxonomists took in order to classify the plants under the natural system of classification is given in the table. For example, Juicy, he classified the plants on the basis of number of cotyledons, presence and absence of metals, and the position of petals and stamens. Similarly, we have got Bentham and Hooker classification, which is an important classification followed still in various herbaria. The classification was based on the seed characteristics of plants. This slide shows the Bentham and Hooker classification. Now, this natural system classification has some advantages. For example, it makes the classification more inclusive. It can be used for bold prediction of ranks and categories for the newly identified plants. This system of classification it contains more exclusive information about the taxonomic hierarchy. It can also help to predict properties of even not so closely related species. And last, the members of different groups are mostly similar in hereditary pattern. However, apart from the advantages, the natural system of classification has some limitations. Number first is the complexity level is more than artificial as it is based on various number of characters. Number second is it is very cumbersome and time consuming. Number third is less known plants cannot be classified through the system since their characteristics are not fully defined. Number four is a single property of interest cannot be taken into consideration for classification. And lastly, this classification does not take into consideration the phylogenetic relationship of different taxa. Now coming to the last system of classification that is phylogenetic. Among the three system of classification, it is the latest system of classification. It is done in very micro scale level, for example cells. It's based on the Darwin's origin of species. This system of classification was first introduced by August Wilhelm Eicher in 1883. The goal of this system is to establish a system of classification which is based on the course of evolutionary descent of its members. System of classification where it is believed that every species is come from the evolutionary chain is the phylogenetic system of classification. So it is defined as a classification system which is based on the phylogenetic characteristics of a species. The phylogenetic system of classification is followed by name various systematicists, for example, Eichler, Engler, Prandtl, Bessey, Wettstein, Halier, Hutchinson, Takhtajan, Horncrest, Thorne, and the newly and the most modern system of classification that is APG, Angiophylogeny Group System. It also is phylogenetic system of classification. The phylogenetic system of classification has some advantages. Number one is it adds a third dimension to the earlier classification methods by involving past history or ancestral history. It is a higher predictive capacity than any other classification. It is more detailed and scientific in nature, and it can help to trace back the evolutionary history of a plant family. However, this system of classification has also some disadvantages. Number one is that it is much more complex in nature than any other classification. It's cumbersome and time consuming. The phenotypic characters are not given importance in the system of classification. And lastly, the same looking species can be grouped together even if they share common phylogeny at a distinct level. Now, here is the comparison between the natural and phylogenetic system of classification. In natural system of classification, it is based on several constant characters used for simple identification. Evolutionary sequence is not considered. Example is pentapentiform classification. While in phylogenetic, it along with several constant characters, evolutionary sequences are important. It is used for studying relationship. The evolutionary affinities are taken into consideration. The examples are Hitchler's, Engler-Prandtl, Hutchinson, and Whitaker's classification. This is a comparison between the natural and artificial system. In natural system of classification, it is based on sum total of all the characters of the numbers, while the artificial system it is based on one or a